Does it surprise you that Donald Trump, who once said about his own sex abuse victim that, and this is in a deposition on video, that she enjoyed being sexually abused? Is there any shock left that he is trying to abuse her again by trying to have the Second Circuit Court of Appeals issue an emergency injunction on a bad faith filing in the last 24 hours in which he wants the money back, the money a jury awarded her? She is the first and last person on planet Earth that had a jury, a judge once and for all, Donald Trump, and brand him a sex abuser. Lots of women have come forward. Many of them have given their narrative, their testimony, their truth in interviews, some even under oath in a courtroom. The only person who's ever had a jury, a judge, Donald Trump, and find him to be a sex abuser is E. Jean Carroll. And she was awarded that money by that jury after a several-week trial, after many levels and layers of appeal, Donald Trump losing every juncture. He then, when everything was done and all of his appellate rights were exhausted, and we were exhausted along with him, he said, "Oh no, I don't want the money paid. Judge Kaplan, you can't pay her the money, even though that's what your order says, because I still have one last piece of paper to throw into the United States Supreme Court." Forget it, said Judge Kaplan. And by July the 9th, she got her $5.8 million. He tried, even then, on the 8th of July, to go to the Second Circuit and say, "Don't pay her the money. Block Judge Kaplan's order directing the clerk to pay her the money." And they refused. Now that she has the money, Donald Trump has filed a new emergency motion to get the appellate court to do that which he's never asked the district court, the trial court level to do, which is already a violation of a rule of appellate procedure. And wait till you hear what E. Jean Carroll's lawyers, led by Robbie Kaplan, have to tell the Second Circuit about this bad faith filing. I think it goes beyond that. I think once they win this, and they will, she gets to keep the $5.8 million that they file. I think they should file a motion for sanctions for appellate misconduct and abuse led by Donald Trump and his lawyers at Sullivan and Cromwell. I'm Michael Popak. Let's get to this new development. I just reported a week or so ago, on the 9th, just 13 days ago, that E. Jean Carroll got the $5.8 million. Now, she's still waiting on the $91 million that Donald Trump also owes her as it makes its way through the last station stop on the train for the United States Supreme Court to reject Donald Trump's appeal of that one. This all stems from her being sexually abused in a dressing room by Donald Trump in 1996 in a department store diagonally across from Trump Tower. Jury believed that because it was true, and by the preponderance of the evidence presented, including the testimony of other women who were sexually abused by Donald Trump, and the jury credited their testimony and other evidence against Donald Trump. Now, once that trial came out, other things that Donald Trump doesn't like, we call them facts, came to light. Like Donald Trump in a deposition mistaking E. Jean Carroll for his first wife. Now remember, Donald Trump's primary defense, not that this is a defense to sexually abuse or raping somebody, is that he did not find them attractive. Donald Trump thought that would help him with the American people. So he said, "I don't find her attractive. I don't even know who she is," until a photo appeared of him with her and some other people. And it sticks in his craw that photo got revealed. And so he said, and this is in the filing by E. Jean Carroll's lawyers, to stop the injunction, stop a court from ordering E. Jean Carroll to pay back the money to Donald Trump or put it back in the court registry. It says, he says in a posting on June 29th, this is just the day after the Supreme Court, after 13 considerations, rejected his petition for appeal without dissent. I mean, not one person on the Supreme Court, not one, not even Kavanaugh, not even Thomas, who have their own sexual abuse and discrimination problems, not one. He said, "Surprisingly, the Supreme Court declined to review a fake case brought against me by a woman I never met." And then he said, he references the photo. Decades old celebrity photo line standing with her husband does not count. you can see that E. Jean Carroll rents space for free in Donald Trump's real estate of his brain. Now, at the top of this hot take, I said that Donald Trump once said about E. Jean Carroll that she enjoyed being sexually abused. If you thought I made that up, here's a clip from his deposition. He's under oath here, folks. Play the clip.
I think she said it was sexy, didn't she? It was very sexy to be raped. Didn't she say that?
So, sir, I just want to confirm. It's your testimony that E. Jean Carroll said that she loved being sexually assaulted by you? And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the pussy. You can do anything. That's what you said, correct?
Well, historically, that's true with stars.
It's true with stars that they can grab women by the pussy?
Well, that's if you look over the last million years, I guess that's been largely true. Not always, but largely true.
Exactly. Now, the photo, I know from having interviewed E. Jean Carroll's lawyer, Robbie Kaplan, of E. Jean Carroll there with her husband, John Johnson at the time, a newscaster of a certain celebrity in New York, and Donald, and laughing about it. It wasn't a selfie, in other words. He wants to make it look like it was a selfie. You know, like when you don't know a celebrity and you photobomb them or you force them into a photo and they stand there like, because they don't really want to be there. This wasn't a photo bomb. There wasn't selfie sticks back then. This is the 90s or the late 80s. This was people who knew each other having a good laugh. And when Donald Trump was presented with it, I know that E. Jean Carroll's lawyer, Robbie, just wanted him to acknowledge that he knew her or he had met her before. But it took a different turn, and it undermined and made Donald Trump look ridiculous. And you see, he's still smarting from it today. Play the deposition clip.
I don't even know who the woman. Let's see. I don't know who. It's Marla.
You say Marla's in this photo?
That's Marla. Yeah, that's my wife.
Which woman are you pointing to? No.
Here.
Carol.
Oh,
the person you just pointed to was E. Jean Carroll.
Who is that? Who is this?
And the woman on the right is your then wife.
I don't
Ivana?
know. This was the picture. I assume that's John Johnson. Is that?
That's Carol.
Because it's very blurry.
Look, magnesium is something most of us aren't getting enough of. And if you're just grabbing the drugstore version, you may not be getting the full picture. Industrial farming, chronic stress, and everyday aging can all make it harder to get the magnesium your body needs. The thing is, magnesium comes in many forms, and each one supports your health in a different way. That's why you need to try Qualia Magnesium Plus. It combines 10 bioavailable forms of magnesium with more than 70 trace minerals that help fuel magnesium support. It's designed to help support deeper sleep, sharper thinking, faster recovery, muscle strength, mood, and energy metabolism. It's not just a sleep supplement, it's a full body magnesium system built for modern living to help you feel your best every day. It's time to improve your sleep and enhance your recovery with Qualia Magnesium Plus. For me, Qualia Magnesium Plus has been a simple addition to my routine that I've genuinely enjoyed. Experience the most trusted magnesium for purity, potency, and performance. Plus, it's non-GMO, vegan, and gluten-free, making it a choice you can feel good about. Go to qualialife.com/legalaf for 50% off. And here's a bonus. Use the code LEGALAF for an additional 15% off your order. That's QUALIA life.com/legalaf and use code LEGALAF. Thanks to Qualia for sponsoring this episode. Now, the primary argument, we'll put this filing by E. Jean Carroll's lawyers that just came in the last 24 hours up in Legal AF Substack. The primary argument is he can't ask for an injunction. Under Rule 8 of the Federal Rules of Appellate Procedure, you've got to seek that kind of injunction with Judge Kaplan, the district court judge, and you never did. And in order to get an injunction, you have to satisfy 4 elements. You have to show that you will likely succeed on the merits. In other words, you're going to win at the United States Supreme Court. Already, he's not going to win at the United States Supreme Court. 13 times from February until June, they looked at that request for an appeal and they rejected it, meaning not one, he couldn't get 4 out of 9 votes, and he controls 6 of them to take up the appeal, let alone 5 to rule in his favor. And finally, it looks like all 9 without dissent threw out the appeal, denied the appeal, period. An appeal about whether Judge Kaplan let in certain evidence of prior sexual abuse or not correctly. which he did. So he says, well, I got one more, even though the stipulation about paying her says as soon as all my appellate rights are exhausted, including a writ of certiorari of appeal filed with the Supreme Court being rejected, but I'm going to do a motion for reconsideration. Well, so what? You do that on your own dime. You do that on your own dime. She gets paid in the meantime. And if you somehow win, she'll pay you back. Oh no, she won't pay me back. But that's not irreparable harm. That's not inadequate remedy at law, because there's no evidence that she won't pay you back. It just means that for the next 2 years, the money's on her side of the ledger, not yours. You've made her wait 3 years. Isn't that fair? Page 3. They say there is more. Plaintiff E Jean Carroll knew who she was dealing with when the jury rendered its verdict. For that reason, the party's stipulation entered on June 23, 2023 by the court explicitly provides that the judgment should be dispersed upon a denial of a timely filed petition for writ of cert, which has now occurred. The stipulation and order say nothing about a petition for rehearing, and defendant cannot rewrite the plain language of the parties' agreement now. They also remind the court on page 20 that she's 82 years old, and that further delay, further gamesmanship by the defendant should not be rewarded. They know they're going to lose this. Trump just wants her to die. Let's call it out for what it is and pay the estate of E. Jean Carroll, then pay E. Jean Carroll and let her benefit from the payment, whatever she's going to do with it in her lifetime. And that's just wrong. And that's inequitable. And that's unfair and unjust. And yet another abuse of his sex abuse survivor. They also say on page 21 and 22 that the public interest would not be served by further delay. Public interest is having plaintiffs who might be entitled to recovery receive compensation while still living and able to use it to improve the quality of their lives. That was a case involving the World Trade Center. And then they end it this way. One paragraph sums it all up. Defendant has lost before a jury. This is Trump, the district court, a unanimous Second Circuit panel, the full Second Circuit en banc, meaning all 20 judges of the Second Circuit, and the Supreme Court of the United States. He agreed in a signed stipulation that Carroll could collect her judgment once a certiorari petition has been denied. That happened. Carroll should not have to wait any longer. I also love the fact they never use the name Trump, except when they have to identify him at the beginning. It's always the defendant and he. They're not going to give him the honorific of President Trump. This case wasn't about President Trump. This case was about E. Jean Carroll, sex abuse survivor, against her tormentor and predator, Donald J. Trump. It was then, it is now. He's been branded a predator and a sex abuser by a jury in New York, plain and simple. Supreme Court has not bailed him out, and I don't think they will. The only way the Supreme Court could grant a motion for reconsideration is if they found there were new evidence that was missed. What is the new evidence? They've already considered the argument. Sullivan and Cromwell, the law firm for Donald Trump, put it in their papers in the petition for the appeal. Main arguments, they let in the testimony of 2 sex abuse survivors of Donald Trump in another context. Okay, federal rules of evidence allow in a sex abuse case you to put in prior bad acts involving sexual misconduct in front of the jury. It's an exception to the general rule that prior bad acts don't come in to prove the current conformity therewith in a current trial. But there's an exception in the rules of evidence created by Congress for sex abuse cases and sexual misconduct cases, plain and simple. The Access Hollywood tape shouldn't have come in, where him saying he could grab a woman by her genitalia and get away with it. Why shouldn't it come in? It shows his misogyny. It shows his approach to sexual misconduct, how he mistreats women. Of course, that should have come in. And even if it came in and it shouldn't have come in, it's not reversible error. That's the argument, because there was a mountain of other testimony the jury considered, including the live testimony of E. Jean Carroll, which was not refuted by Donald Trump, who did not take the stand. He was busy golfing in Scotland instead. He made that calculation not to testify. And the testimony of witnesses, what we call witnesses, outcry witnesses. Those are witnesses who, at the time that the sexual abuse happened, she spoke to 2 of her friends. One wrote the preppy guide Carolyn Birnbach. She wrote a book about preppies, the Preppy Guide to Life or whatever it was. And Carol Martin, who was a local CBS News reporter. And the reason she put on those witnesses is because there was an argument that she waited like 25 years to bring up the case. But at the time it happened, she told her truth to those two witnesses. We call them outcry witnesses. And they testified that after hearing what happened to her in the dressing room, they said, E. Jean, you were raped. I mean, because she couldn't even believe it and what had happened to her. She has a passing knowledge of Donald Trump. And they testified. So that's one of the reasons the Supreme Court doesn't want to touch it. The second case she has for about $92 million, that's going to kick around the United States Supreme Court probably until the beginning of the new term, which begins in October. That's about whether immunity, not criminal immunity, because this was not a criminal case. This was a civil case. But whether Donald Trump, when he defamed her again as president of the United States the first time, and punitive damages were awarded against him, whether he was doing his official job, his employee badge as president, his scope of work, we call it Westfall or federal employee immunity, whether that is covered or not, or whether that was waived or not by Alina Habba. I believe it was waived. The Second Circuit believes it was waived twice. And now the Supreme Court hopefully will find the same thing, and she'll get her $92 million running with interest. We'll continue to follow it right here. I'm Michael Popok. Take a minute, hit the free subscribe button. Help us to continue to grow our pro-democracy channel on Legal AF. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.